I'm Louie Palmer, welcome back to PlayBetterDrums.com, and today we're going to look at the drum solo loop from Little Trees, which is one of the play-along songs on the site, and I've had a few requests for just the drum solo looped over and over. So I've provided an MP3, two MP3s, one with the click, one without the click, about 10 minutes of the loop repeating. The loop itself goes around 8 times, and then there's a 2-bar gap before the loop starts again. So you can use those MP3s to practice in a bunch of different ways, which we'll talk about. It can be great practice to just to play long periods like that, like 10 minutes, and not necessarily play the same things every time, but you're just practicing. So you can practice grooves to it, you can practice soloing, you can practice soloing and catching every hit, you can practice soloing and catching some of the hits, and just generally practice your ideas and let your imagination happen, and practice putting things together within some boundaries, which is what's happening rhythmically with the riff. So we'll go over some of the grooves that I play and some of the soloing things, but the lesson request that came in was how do you approach something like this? And I recently did a masterclass in London, and this question came up. I played this song, I also played a drum solo, and so someone was asking how you approach the two things and how are they different in your approach, even though they're both soloing. So with this song and this riff, the first thing that I should say is that obviously listening to music is the most important thing, because when you're faced with a certain musical situation, if it's a groove, you've got to play a solo vamp like this, you've got to play on a certain feel that you're faced with playing. Some references will pop up in your mind. You'll think, oh, that's really like this Gad thing, or that's really Steve Ferroni-ish, or whoever your favorite drummers are, or whoever you've just heard do a certain thing, and that helps you know what to play. And also just listening to music in general to know what is suitable. So, you know, the drums have been going for 3 or 4 minutes up until this point where the drum solo starts, and so I stopped playing and left some space for 2 of those 8 rounds of the loop. And during those first 2, I'm playing a few little tasty kind of swung fills, but leaving a lot of space and playing the riff, playing with the rhythmic accents. And then I introduce a groove for a couple of times. Then the 5th and 6th time, the 5th time I'm playing a slightly different groove, a louder, kind of more consistent 8th notes on the hi-hat kind of groove. Then the 6th one, I'm starting to introduce the soloing. And then 7 and 8, I'm full on soloing, because 7 and 8, the Hammond organ comes in with the big chords, so I'm playing some more aggressive soloing things. And on the last one, I go to 32nd notes for that final push. So I'm trying to think in structurally and try to, you know, start here and build to the end, because the instrumentation is suggesting that I do that. If I was to not do that and those big Hammond organ chords come in and I'm still playing a little groove, or I'm not playing enough information, it's going to let down what's going on. So one interesting thing is when people say play musically, or you got to play for the song. When I was young, I never used to know exactly what that meant, and what I thought it meant when someone said play musically, play for the song, is to play less. Don't play too loud, don't play too much, don't play too aggressive. But it depends what's going on in the music. If you underplay, underplaying is just as bad as overplaying, because in both scenarios you're not supporting what's going on. If you play too much, then it just sounds wrong. But if you play too little, in certain situations, it can sound wrong. If you're playing a pop song even, or a rock song that's, you know, got a vocal happening and it's fairly simple from the drums, if the big chorus is coming up and you don't play any fill, or you play like a 1-beat fill or 2 beats at the end of the bar, and then the big chorus hits, you haven't supported the change in the music. Maybe it's a key change, maybe it's from a verse to a chorus or a bridge to a chorus. So it would just let down the music, and that's underplaying. So that's just something to be aware of, that it really depends what's going on in the music. So if we get to the riff, the first thing to do with something like this is to think about how to play the rhythmic accents. So I've written down 2 versions. I've written down the actual notation, and then I've written down a version where you play all the sixteenths in the bar and you try and figure out where the rhythmic accents are falling. So for example, so one possible upside is that it's all right hands. So now we know that, if we were to play singles, of course, but that allows you to understand what's happening rhythmically, because that's really important. Even though a lot of the time I'm not catching every hit, I still know where it is in terms of how it's lining up with what I'm playing. So first thing to do is to just play sixteenths through it, and then play some grooves. And so now we should talk about the grooves that I was playing in the third, fourth, and fifth rounds of this. So in fact, first what we'll do is I'll show you the version that I played, not in the lesson version from the website and the play-along lesson, but from the version that I put on YouTube, where you can also see Janek Gwizdala playing bass and piano, so you can see exactly and also hear what's going on with the other instruments, because that's going to affect what the drums play. So here's that version. Okay, so the grooves I played. The first one is this. So slowed down. Open hi-hat is really important, how long you leave it open. Don't close it too soon. We're going to close it on the next backbeat. So it's really important, the swung feel. So this is a little tricky sticking-wise, perhaps, unusual, the way the left hand plays on the hi-hat, but you've really got to concentrate on the feel most of all, particularly with this drum solo loop section is kind of still groove-based. It doesn't go straight into a drum solo. So that's the first one. The next one is the same, but we change the ending. We add a couple of ghost notes. So the ending is now. So that's another version. The last, or the third version, is a little more tricky. So slowed down. could also add in the open hi-hat again. The closing of it in this version is a little tricky. So I'm kind of closing it on this left hand. And it's not perfect, but that's okay. I still kind of catch some of the open sound. So with the music, this is not going to be in the right place, but so one thing to note from trying to do that is that it's a little faster than I was demonstrating, and also it's hard for me anyway. It feels weird not to catch the hits at the end, to just play through it. So the first section of each section, the first part, is quite sparse, but just not catching those hits is weird. So you're going to have to. This is why this is great practice. You're going to have to learn to play the grooves, whether it's these ones or your own, and then still catch the hits. And you're going to have to play some fills around the end. So, for example. So the more you play it, the more you'll get used to that. The next section I played this groove. Slowed down. So a lot of ghost notes happening. That second or first snare drum accent that isn't a backbeat is towards the end is important. And then we've also got that ghost note after the backbeat. So dynamic, super important, help with the flow, will make it sound good. If you play the ghost notes too loud, it's just going to sound way too much information. So they're the grooves that I played. That particular one was on the fifth section, fifth loop or time round. The sixth time I broke away from that and started to play a few triplet-y kind of fills. And then 6 and 7 are soloing. So 16th note triplets. But it's a fairly brisk tempo, so you got to have your triplet stickings together, really together, even if there's only a few of them, to be able to play at that tempo. And then you're also thinking about the accents. So earlier when we were talking about the accents and playing 16th notes, so that would be that, but then to play it's very difficult to play continuous 16th note triplets and catch the accents. The reason I can do it in terms of when I'm soloing is because it's not continuous. There's breaks, which makes it musical. It would be unmusical if you played continuously. So you try and gradually put things in that are triplets and that are faster from the 16ths. So let's just try that. So I'll put the loop on and just try to practice the soloing aspect, starting with very simple 8th note things, then going to 16th note triplets. So it's really experimenting, I threw in a couple of triplet things. And as you go for something, you know, you think you know how it's going to turn out leading into an accent, but until you try it, you don't know, because sometimes you think it's going to work this way, but actually you finished a little late and you couldn't catch the accent, or you finished early, or you thought it was going to be a right hand with the accent, but then it was a left hand, or vice versa. So this kind of practice is just long periods sitting with the riff, letting it go by many, many, many times, and you'll start to get more comfortable with it and throw in some more advanced things. You'll stumble and then you'll work out why, and things will get better. And then in the last section, I did 30-second notes, which is tough at that tempo. So I did a few things that are slightly easier to play, like, for me anyway, where I did this, which is using doubles. So 6-stroke roll. But I'm playing the 2 accents at the beginning as kind of a flam. And then you can orchestrate that different ways. And then I played it with the bass drum and cymbal. And then I did that, which is just singles. So let's try those things with the riff. So that's tough when you haven't warmed up. It's very fast to play 30 seconds at that tempo. But the practice part of it is not going to be the finished article, because to play like a take of that and try and come up with a musical solo that has a beginning, middle, and an end is the finished product. But the practice part of it will just be almost like practicing exercises, because you'll be trying to get a certain idea to fit. And in order to do that, you've got to do it over and over and over again. So that's why it's great to have this 10-minute version, is because you can just keep doing it. And also moving back from the 30-second notes, you can practice many, many times through the loop just playing grooves. It doesn't have to be a big drum solo thing. You don't have to approach it like that. I chose to do that thing where I went from leaving space to grooves to soloing, but you could play grooves throughout. So let's try a take where I just play some groove stuff. See how that works. So that's something that you could try. I haven't done that. I hadn't done that before with that song, but you could do that. And so having just done that for the first time, I realized that certain things worked and certain things didn't. You have to, again, with the energy of the Hammond organ coming in those last two times, you have to do something to support it. So I was on the open hi-hats to begin with, but really you should have been on the ride cymbal. So maybe my, the rate at which I built things should have been different, because you gotta support that extra noise, that extra energy. And so ride cymbal, bell of the cymbal, crash cymbals coming in help with that energy. And just trying to come up with interesting musical question and answer things within grooves. So maybe if you're not going to do the drum solo thing in terms of, chops and 30-second notes and triplets and stuff, you can stay hi-hat, bass drum, snare drum, but you've got to come up with something to say, something interesting, because it's kind of a long section if you're just going to stay on these, mainly stay on these three voices. So that's how a couple of different options of how to approach it and how to practice it. Learn to sit with the rhythm and the riff and become really confident with that. So now I'll just play. I'll practice it. I'll play a few times through, maybe once or twice, and I'll try that groove thing again, and then maybe I'll do a soloing one again and try and play some different stuff.